guys, it's Sam coming to you with not natural lighting. I'm going to address the elephant in the room. I know you guys love the natural lighting videos, and you do love this background, so I'm hoping that you won't be really distraught about this. But what I realized over the last month or so is that me trying to film with natural lighting is not really working, because for the entire, has it been almost 8 years? Has it been almost 7 years? For the entire time I've been on BookTube, I have always been a night filmer. I've always filmed at night. I've always been in rooms that require a ring light or any kind of whatever lighting that I was using at the time, and it's been fine. I thought like, oh, I can start filming during the day. It'll give me some flexibility, and I can still do that, but then it relegated me to only filming during the day, and I actually don't do my most productive work during the day. I'm a night hobbyist. I do my hobby stuff at night. I do my creative stuff at night. I do my errands during the day so I can come home and do this at night. So I need to be able to film at night. So I'm hoping this lighting isn't too super harsh for you guys. I am going to play around with it a little bit, but I wanted to at least try to do this, and that will likely mean a more consistent schedule, although I've been pretty decent the last couple of weeks, but I had a couple really busy weeks in June and things that made for some inconsistency, which I don't love. I've never loved. So I'm hoping this lets me get back into it during my creative time of day. But anyway, with that out of the way, we have my June wrap up. So I read 5 books in June, so not too bad. I feel like June was when I started to slightly come out of my reading slump, which is nice. Still not like reading voraciously or anything, but I'm more inclined to read, and I'm getting through books a little bit quicker than I had been the last few months, so I'm hoping to continue to come out of this. We will have cameos from Binks throughout this video because he's a very needy boy. So 5 books, but not a lot of good ones for me. The first book I finished in June was Wild Love by Lauren Accardo. This is an adult contemporary romance. It follows 2 perspectives. First we have Sydney, and she's a city girl who's running away to northern New York, upstate New York, where her mother lives, to kind of escape her life in New York, where her partner of many years just cheated on her, and she needs a break and runs away to this small town to be with her mom and then to also help out her mother's bookstore. Our other main character is Sam, and he is kind of this like gruff country guy who has some complicated stuff going on in his current life, and these two cross paths and everything kind of goes from there. I said this in my Goodreads review, but I'm feeling more and more like the trope of city girl runs away to country and meets gruff country complicated guy and they like fall in love. I always am drawn to that trope, but I don't ever particularly like how it's executed. There are trigger warnings in here for alcoholism and fat phobia. The fat phobia throughout the book is like completely unnecessary. The alcoholism is part of the plot, but the fat phobia stuff, just like the main character drops in stuff about her body and like gaining weight and stuff like all the time, so it's really off-putting. But the thing that really just kind of like didn't work for me with this book is that the 2 main characters really are glaring red flags for each other. Like these 2 characters when they meet should be like, oh no, and they don't. Like for example, Sam has some history with other women in his life and alcoholism, other people in his life and alcoholism, and when Sydney first gets there, she's drinking a lot, and she's not a complete alcoholic, but she's using alcohol as a coping mechanism, and he does not like that, and yet he's still like, ugh. And I'm like, dude, have you learned nothing? And then with him, he's very like emotionally unavailable because of all these complicated things going on with him, and that gets revealed throughout the story, so I don't kind of want to go into like what exactly is happening, but he basically isn't really in a position to date at this point, which again, she just got out of a relationship with the emotionally unavailable man who cheated on her. So again, glaring red flags, and for some reason these 2 like still want to be together. So I found myself like not really pulling for them a whole lot, and just kind of being like, why are you guys so into each other when you're walking red flags for each other? So I end up giving this one 2 out of 5 stars. Next we have Dark Fever by Karen Marie Moning. This is the first book in a adult paranormal, it's not really paranormal romance, it's a paranormal urban fantasy series that has more romantic undertones, I think, as the series goes on. And I read this as part of the Read That Book challenge that my friend Sarah Jane and I do, where we challenge each other to read books that the other one has read and see if we like them. I went into this knowing that I wasn't necessarily going to be a huge fan of this first book, that I might continue or I might not. I know a lot of people have very polarizing feelings about it. But I did a whole reading vlog, a spoilery reading vlog of my whole experience as I was reading it, so if you guys have read the book and you want more of my in-depth thoughts on it, I will link that on the screen. But this does have trigger warnings for gore and what I would classify as mind rape. This is a fae series, and our main character, who is like early 20s, like 22, which I always thought that she was older when people talked about this book, but she's like 22. She goes to Dublin because her sister was just brutally murdered and is trying to solve the crime of her sister's murder, but then gets like pulled into like the fae world and the paranormal world and everything because it's tied to the paranormal creatures like in the area. The mind rape thing is one of the fae's abilities that she runs into in the story. But anyway, this is very classic urban fantasy of its time. I don't want to make excuses for it as if the writing was like ever good or something, because I don't think that it ever really was, but I am very used to urban fantasy and some of the tropes that come along with it of stuff that's written in like the early 2000s, and that's when this was written. So we do have a lot of like macho alpha male type behavior, although the character who does that is not a love interest, at least in this book. But I think the thing that's most frustrating about this book is our main character feels young and old at the same time. She makes really naive, stupid decisions, and it's just like really infuriating in a lot of ways. But the lore and the setting and everything is really cool, and I'm still like intrigued about some of that stuff. So I end up giving this one 3 out of 5 stars. Like, I didn't hate it, again, because I think I am much less sensitive to some urban fantasy tropes than others are, because I read it a lot as a teenager and in college. So it feels semi-nostalgic to me. It actually made me want to go back and read some of those old series like Anita Blake that I talk about. And I think I will continue this series by getting it from the library, and just like when I want something really quick and easy to read, because these are, pick it up and see if I want to keep continuing the series. The next book I read was The Road Trip by Beth O'Leary. This is an adult contemporary standalone, and it follows our main characters Addie and Dylan, and in the past they dated for a while. They met during the summer in France and had this like whirlwind romance and were together, but in present day they have broken up and they're both on their way to a wedding. They end up getting in a car accident with each other, like a fender bender, and they have to be in the car together with their friends going to this wedding, this mutual friend's wedding. And so we have like present day stuff that's happening, as well as flashing back to what happened in their past, because something huge broke them up and we don't know what happened, and there's all these like conflicting dynamics and everything. And so we follow the story told both in like, here's what happened in the past, here's what's going on in the present. This book is much heavier than I expected, and I have a whole laundry list of trigger warnings for this. There's alcoholism, drug abuse, sexual assault, emotional abuse from parents, and stalking. And some of these topics are handled better than others. So I wasn't really expecting that when I went into this book. I was definitely expecting like a second chance romance, which is, but there was, like I said, a lot of heavier topics going on. And ultimately, I don't think some of the heavier topics were handled as well as they could have been. And also the way that the relationship was set up, when we get these flashbacks, I think something that like kind of took away from the romance for me is when we get these flashbacks, we have very few moments of them actually being happy. It seems like their entire relationship was fairly tumultuous, not necessarily toxic because of each other, but more toxic because of outside circumstances and kind of the people that were involved in their lives and stuff as well. So we had a lot of that going on, so where we didn't really get to see like why they were so drawn to each other and kind of like wanting to get back together. Like, we didn't really get to see that, in my opinion. And then some of these other circumstances that finally come to a head in like present day, again, weren't really resolved well. The stalking is like almost brushed off and seen as like funny and not really addressed, and that's pretty serious, so don't love that. And some of the stuff with the friends, I think some of the friends and their dynamics that they played in their relationship, the friends got off like a little bit too easy for me. So some of those bits left this from being better for me, but I did ultimately like still kind of pull for them for some reason. So Beth O'Leary did write them in a way that like, even though we didn't get to see quite enough, and I think this could have been better, I still did like ultimately like I could like feel the tension with them. And also what was cool is, because we see the past and the present, we do see how they've grown up and matured in the time that they've been apart since their relationship, and that was really cool to see. So I did feel like there was some good character development there. I just wish we would have seen more of some of these accountability things on page. So I ended up giving this one 3.5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read was Sweet and Bitter Magic by Adrienne Tooley. This was my Bibliothecary book pick for the month, so every month my supporters there get to vote in a poll for a book that I will read and review. We do a buddy read together on Discord, and then I do review here. So if you're interested in being part of my content in that way, I will link my Patreon on the screen. And I have done a full spoiler-free review on this, so I will link that one on the screen as well. This follows Ren and Tamsin. Tamsin is a witch who has been exiled from her people because of doing some dark magic. She's also been cursed with the inability to love, and can only get her love from the love of other people, like taking that almost as payment for services. Ren is actually a source of magic, so she's not a witch, but she can see magic, and then she can like filter magic to witches. She can be kind of used as a nice like companion tool to a witch. And she hid her power away so that she wouldn't be taken from her family, because her brother and her mother were killed by magic in the past, and she's taking care of her sickly father still. A plague breaks out that is rooted in dark magic, and so these two end up crossing paths and having to team up because Ren's father becomes sick with this. And so she makes a deal with Tamsin that if she helps her try to discover and shut down the plague, that she will pay Tamsin with her father's love so that Tamsin can feel, and everything goes from there. This is a standalone YA fantasy, and it also has a sapphic romance between these two. But ultimately this one felt a little flat for me and will be, I think, ultimately really forgettable. The first half of the story had like some cool world building with, it almost felt like a fairy tale tale-esque setting, but without it being a full-blown fairy tale retelling of any kind. And I did like the magic and some stuff about dark magic, but it felt like the second half of the story, everything got wrapped up a little bit too quickly and easily because it is a standalone, but it just got wrapped up a little bit too easily without there being a lot of consequences. And these two characters, I didn't really feel the like build up to them being romantically involved. It just kind of happened, and I wasn't like for or against it. I was very like neutral about it. So I think this one will very quickly fade into the background of my memory. So like a 2.5 star, like right in the middle. I feel very neutral about it. And the last book that I read was Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is a standalone historical fiction that's following a family, a famous family, the children of this like famous singer in this fictional world. And it is a series of both flashbacks to these kids' like childhood and like their parents' story and all the things that affected them growing up, leading up to now where they are all like kind of famous in their own right, and there is a yearly party at the oldest sibling's estate, and like some craziness is gonna go down there. There's some trigger warnings in here for alcoholism and parental death and abandonment. When I was writing out all the trigger warnings for this month, I realized I read a lot of books that featured alcoholism as a main thing, but this was actually our House Salt Book Club pick for this month, so we've done a live show already that I will link on the screen with all of our in-depth thoughts. We actually had like a pretty wide array of thoughts about this book, but I ended up not liking it. I like Taylor Jenkins Reid's other books. That's like hard to say. But this book felt really disjointed to me. I'm gonna be doing a full spoiler-free review that is coming up later on in the month, so you'll get my in-depth thoughts there. But this felt like two separate books to me. There was this beginning part of the book that was a lot of flashing back to the kids' childhood and actually their parents and their dad, who's a narcissistic abuser, and like the toxic relationship that he had with their mother and what he did to them and how he abandoned them and her and all this stuff. So we get a lot of that, and then the second half of the book is this big party where a bunch of other POVs are thrown in of some of the party attendees, and you don't get a chance to like care about any of them, and it's kind of like this weird like filler fluff thing. And what I would have preferred is either to have a book that's mostly about the part one stuff or mostly about the party. What I was actually expecting was a book that was mostly about the party, and what I would have preferred was a book with this party setting with all these POVs and using those POVs to drop in all this information about the past instead of having all these flashbacks about the past, and us getting the same kind of information that way with expanded party POVs, and then that would have been like probably perfect for me. So I don't think it was poorly written necessarily, it just really wasn't for me, and the two parts of the story didn't really flow together well in my opinion, so it's made the characters not super fleshed out for me. What I liked about Taylor Jenkins Reid's other books is how complex and fleshed out the characters were and how just like character driven the story felt. This was a more thematically driven story in my opinion, and so the characters I think are gonna fade very quickly for me, and they felt a little bit more one note. So I didn't enjoy this as much as the other books that I read by her, and I gave it 2 stars. I just realized I went through this whole video and didn't hold up any of the books, but I only had 2 to hold up anyway, so it's fine. But that is it for all the books that I read in June. So as you can see, didn't have a great reading month, but we're hoping that July's gonna be better. So comment below, let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see all of you guys soon. Bye.